David Stroud. Dave and I share a couple of common things in our heritage. Dave dropped out of high school and never graduated. So did I. My father served as a prosecutor at the Nuremberg war trials. One of Dave's professors at the University of Michigan was the chief psychologist at the Nuremberg war trials. We've asked him to join us here today because he's one of those individuals that's uniquely situated to give us a big picture, to cover the waterfront overview of the beef industry, where it's been and where he thinks it's going. He's the Senior Vice President of Schaffner Communications in Chicago, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you, ladies and gentlemen of South Dakota, Mr. David Stroud. David?
He might also have pointed out that we're both Chicago Bears fans, for better or worse. And now for the diplomatic portion of this presentation. As you leave, there'll be a single sheet of paper being handed to you, or which you can pick up at the table at this far end of the courseway out here. It has on it a list of the names of 5 companies, 5 publishing companies, all of them in the meat processing business. They are the 5 principal magazines reporting to the meat processing and meat packing industry what's going on in the meat processing and packing industry. And my advice to you, to everyone here, is that you pick that sheet up and write to at least 2 of those publications and ask for a subscription, preferably all 5. You get a lot of repetition, but you'll have a picture of the meat processing industry that no one who isn't in the meat processing industry ever is going to have. Andy spoke, and several of our speakers have spoken, about being informed. And one of the things I've discovered in all the years that I've worked for agriculture and worked for farmers and worked for ranchers and worked in the livestock and meat industry is that the people I worked for were not as well informed as I was on what was going on. That wasn't their fault. It's just that was my job, was to be informed. And I seriously urge you to subscribe. You may even get a free, you write the right kind of letter, you may get a comp subscription. But do subscribe to at least 2 of those 5 magazines, if not more. Now I want to tell you that I've looked everywhere, but I can't find it. I can't find it. I mean, I have looked everywhere. I found 10 of them, the first 10. They go, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt honor thy father and mother. Thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. Thou shalt not commit. I mean, they are almost all here, but only 10. Some years ago, a cattleman whom I respected told me that there's an 11th commandment. I've been looking for it ever since. He said it is, thou shalt eat beef every day. But it isn't anywhere to be found, not in my notes, not in anywhere I've read or looked, and not on this planet. The cattleman was wrong. There is no such commandment. There never was, and there never will be. I'll back up Andy's statement, as many of my statements will, and to say that if our market is the American consumer, then the phrase, not the commandment, but the observation, is that he or she will eat what looks good if it's priced right in the right place at the right time. And in a nutshell, that's why poultry is winning the war, and I can stop talking right now and sit down. But I got this far on this cane, and I'm not going to stop talking and sit down. Let me explain why there is no 11th commandment, and I'll do it in the timeless prose of one Professor Max Brunk, a professor of marketing at Cornell University who may not be alive anymore, because when he addressed the Livestock Marketing Congress, it was in 1971, 25 years ago, and he was a senior citizen then. Quoting, "Contrary to popular opinion among businessmen, markets are not a right. No one individual, no one industry owns a franchise on any market. You have to work and scheme and sweat to produce livestock. But that does not give you a right to a market. To get that right, you also have to work and scheme and sweat to create markets, to take markets away from someone else, to keep someone else from taking your markets away. This has been true in the past, and it will continue to be true. Close quote on Dr. Brunk. He uttered those unforgettable and infinitely profound words a quarter century ago, and the remarks themselves, like the subject that he was discussing, are as true today as ever and will always be, because there is no 11th commandment. Now let's step back just a bit, because that was only 25 years ago. We'll go a little farther back, during beef's reign as king of the menu. Other protein foods, or center-of-the-plate foods, as the restaurant services like to call it, had nowhere to go but up. They had to. Beef was so overwhelmingly preferred by Americans that there was nowhere to go but out or up. And I speak principally of poultry. At the same time, there began a concentration of chicken production that Andy referred to into fewer and fewer hands. Chicken farmers began to see an economic benefit in raising chickens without having to lay out the capital to own them. A vertical integration of the ownership of chickens, and eventually of the tools of chicken production, and even of the techniques of chicken marketing, had begun. The potential profit in chicken was seen not in the raising of these critters, but in what more a processor could do with them that would ease the labor and the spoilage and the transport problems, spell all of those reduced costs of the wholesaler and the retailer, and excite the palates of the consumer. And most important, the cost of putting a chicken in the meat counter came with some outlandish ideas, which I'm about to explain, and it helped make chicken a whole lot cheaper. Now I'll jump to the middle 1960s, or slightly earlier. I participated in the annual gathering of the biannual gathering of the American Meat Institute and the then National Association of Food Chains. They got together every couple of years to discuss common problems and to see if they could resolve them. And they always brought in a couple of speakers, one or two, to discuss some novel idea, maybe a politician. But in this particular year, they brought in a couple of chicken guys from an outfit called Holly Farm Poultry Industries in North Carolina. Now, these two fellows described a new process of chicken merchandising that was largely production and merchandising. It was largely unknown to this group. They said they could save the retailers untold labor, handling, storage, and spoilage costs by cutting the chicken up in North Carolina instead of back where all these supermarkets were. And they further said they could package it for them, have it ready for sale, and ship it within 48 hours as far west as Chicago. They even said they'd eventually be able to have a lot of different combinations of those packages. But right now they only had 6 different combinations. You could get all wings, you could get all drumsticks, you could get wings and drumsticks, you could get breasts, you could get a half a chicken, you could get a whole chicken. Well, every retailer in the place listened, kind of nodding and slightly disbelieving amazement, but only slightly disbelieving. Almost every meat packer in the room, remember these were the presidents of meat retail chains and the presidents of packing companies, almost every packer in the place shook his head and murmured, well, maybe they can pull that off with chicken, but they'll never do it with the red meats, and they'll never do it with beef. They can't pull that one off with beef. Well, did they pull it off with chicken? You know the answer to that. Now Holly Farms, owned, I think, by Tyson and Conagra and Cargill and good old homely Frank Perdue, can deliver at least 36 different package combinations to a retailer's door, already packaged, perhaps with the retailer's own label on it, with the retailer's own price on it, delivered in Chicago in 48 hours? How about in Honolulu in 48 hours? Well, it was about that same time that 3 different guys, a couple of packer cattle buyers and a cattle farmer from Iowa, had gotten together around the farmer's kitchen table, swapping intelligence about the pokey and inefficient way meat packers disassembled cattle, doing it just about exactly the same way that it had been done at the turn of the century, give or take some more modern tools. And furthermore, about the same 4 or 5, 6, and 7-story packing plants that were built at about that time of the turn of the century. And these three guys reasoned that it ought to be possible to start with some new bricks and mortar, build a building on 1 level instead of on 6 or 7 levels. Don't build it in the city where all these other ones were, in Fort Worth, Omaha, Kansas City, gone from Chicago by then, Sioux City. But build them out in the country closer to the cattle. And that worked pretty well. They struggled for a few years, but about the mid-1960s, slightly later, they got another idea, that instead of shipping a 640-pound carcass, as many of you know, that's about the average wholesale weight of a 1,000-pound steer. Instead of shipping a 640-pound carcass to Chicago or New York or San Francisco or Omaha or wherever they were shipping it to, that they could cut that steer up, leave a lot of fat and bone at the plant, and ship the same 480 pounds average that side would be when the retailer got finished cutting it up. Now, it so happens those three guys were not members of the American Meat Institute at that time, and they weren't at that meeting. But they must have been reading one of those 5 magazines I talked about a little while ago, because they had the outlandish idea that the chicken guys had. They figured that they could do this by offering parts of a side of beef in boxes instead of swinging weight. And now you know who those 3 guys are, the ones who founded and improved Iowa Beef Processors. And I don't come here to speak in defense of IBP, but those nights at the farmer's kitchen table were the start of a revolution in the beef industry. It took most of the rest of the packing industry 10 to 20 years to follow the leader. And follow they did, slowly. And today it's pretty tough to find a swinging carcass anywhere coming off a truck or a rail car these days. It's all in boxes. And I'm not sure there are 36 combinations possible, but there's bloody near 36 combinations possible. The savings were prodigious, not simply the fat and bone, but labor, storage, refrigeration, transport at both the packer and retailer levels. In the sectors of the industry where the retailer counts profits at 1 to 2% on sales, and the packer's not likely to do much better. Well, that's enough of that history, but it seemed important to let you know that I lived through that period, and that's one of the things that the governor, or Bill, mentioned in introducing me, that I should be looking at the big picture. Had those revolutionary processes in chicken and in beef not taken place, well, if it had not taken place in beef, I'm not sure there would be as large a beef industry today as there is. And the irony is, because a nearly identical revolution took place in the poultry industry, beef has problems in the marketplace it wouldn't have otherwise have had. It is an irony. But what about today? Let me mention some of the work of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and I don't champion them either. Just look and see what people are doing. Mark Thomas, a fellow who's the National Cattlemen's Beef Association's head man for New Product Initiative. And New Product Initiative is a way of saying, kind of a business school way of saying, here's what we're going to try and do for you today. New Product Initiatives told the North Dakota audience this past October that, quoting, what we do, the beef industry, what we do in the next 4 years will determine the next 100 years for the beef industry, end quote. And that's more than a bold statement. It's a deep and broad look into, I wish you hadn't used this phrase, Kathleen, but into a crystal ball, and seeing the future as it must be. So what's clouding the crystal ball? I want to read a few things to you. First of all, these are all related to the consumer marketplace. From the November 11th U.S. News and World Report, based on the latest report from Marriott Management Services, which provides meals for dining halls on 550 college campuses, it is estimated that at least 15% of the students it serves are vegetarians for whom they must prepare meatless meals. But the demand is increasing so rapidly that Marriott's dietitians are working overtime to devise new vegetarian fare. At some schools, vegetarians have become a not-so-silent majority. At Sarah Lawrence College, for example, in New York, 60% of the undergraduates eat no meat. In short, the report concluded vegetarianism is becoming an ingrained way of life on many of today's college campuses. Is it serious? You talk to some of those 60% and you'll find out that they don't eat beef, and they don't eat pork, and they don't eat lamb, but they probably eat a little chicken, they'll eat a little fish, they'll drink milk, they'll eat a little cheese. They're not real vegetarians. And I think a lot of that's going to change. As they grow older and wiser and know what a good piece of beef tastes like, they'll probably give up their vegetarianism. This is not to say that it isn't serious. When I was growing up and in college, somewhere between 1% and 2% of the American population declared themselves to be vegetarians, who also incidentally ate eggs and drank milk and ate cheese. But if 60% of Sarah Lawrence colleges say it is, there's a difference. I just don't know how serious it is, but it's certainly something the industry has to keep its eye on. To get a better picture of what the NCBA's Mark Thomas was talking about, from all 5 of those magazines I quoted a moment ago, I picked up these stories from the last 3 months, by the way. Marinated pork is a growing category, and consistency in flavor and appearance will keep it that way. That's a headline in a story about the newly developed product from meat and poultry processing. Hudson Specialty Foods, Cincinnati, has added a double pork chop to its lineup of cooked frozen products. Shelf life, 14 days. Smiley's Foods, Temple, Texas, now offers 3 new pita roll-up sandwiches, including deluxe ham, ham and turkey and cheese. Swift Eckrich, Downers Grove, Illinois, introduces Swift Premium Bacon Burritos. Bacon burritos. Trident Seafoods Corp., Seattle, wins a State of Alaska competition with filet de salmon croquette, suitable for grilling, microwaving, baking, or pan frying. Talk about convenience. Bilmar Foods, Zeeland, Michigan, adds to its already bursting turkey lineup a 99% fat-free oven-roasted turkey breast and hardwood smoked turkey, turkey ham, and turkey pastrami. Hatfield Quality Meats, Hatfield, Pennsylvania, has introduced Tender Pork Plus Tenderloin Fillets, 3 varieties, natural pork, peppercorn, and teriyaki. The National Pork Producers Council contracted with a consultant to invent barbecued pork frizzlers, and they're now in the market in brand form. Pepino Foods, St. Petersburg, Florida, launched Pilgrim's Dream low-fat Italian turkey sausage. Hot and spicy chicken breast tenders has been created by the Broaster Company, Beloit, Wisconsin. Venison America, Rosemount, Minnesota, is marking kippered steak and summer sausage products, tender, mild in taste, and low in fat and categories. Are you getting tired of this? I got more. Let me do just one more. This is taken from the December 9th Crain's Chicago Business. The headline is, "A Real Hot Dog Hopes to Make Fish Stick." They're big on puns in Crain's Chicago Business. At Portillo's Hot Dogs on Route 59 in Naperville, the parking lot is full by noon each weekday. By dinner, the crowds have shifted from the hot dog stand a block away to the hottest ticket in town, Key Wester Fish and Pasta, where the wait for a table on Saturday night stretches more than 2 hours. It was a story for Crain's Chicago Business because the same guy owns both restaurants. Now, I haven't reported that these same magazines carry some news of some newly developed beef products as well, but nowhere near as many as pork, nowhere near as many as turkey, nowhere near as many as chicken, nowhere near as many as fish. But beef is there, and if the aforequoted Mark Thomas has anything to say about it, there's going to be more and more beef coming to market in value-added, quick-fix portion packages. And the fact is that Mark and his cohorts signed a contract last month with Jimmy Dean to put a new product on the market that was invented in the NCBA's test kitchens. It's the 3rd such new product, what they call a new product commercial partnership, and Thomas's group is constantly on the prowl for more. That product is dealing with the front and the rear end and the belly of the beast that Andy was talking about. Nobody has to worry about the middle meats. They're going to sell, and they're going to sell at just about whatever price they're offered. But it's the rest of it that's going to make a difference. Now, having said that, here and there you may run into a beef purist. I'm afraid we've got one running the state. Well, I know he was just kidding with his comments about John's advertisements. You may run into a beef purist who claims that you ruin a good piece of beef by fooling around with it. All those sauces and marinades and gravies and fancy recipes do is mask the absolutely wonderful natural flavors of beef. Developing them is a waste of time and money, say the purists. Well, I think that's a Luddite point of view. That's an opinion most often expressed, incidentally, by the 11th Commandment crowd. You see, I agree that a piece of fresh beef makes up a magnificent meal, whether it would be the absolutely wonderful stew that my wife cooked that we ate the other night. Actually, we ate 2 nights because we eat leftovers. Or the best steak I've had in a restaurant lately. And such mealtime experiences are an absolute tribute to the cattle ranch that produced those cows and the feeding operation that fed them out, that produced that beef. But you see, I can't always find that quality of product. But I do know that all those sauces and marinades and fancy recipes and gravies probably doubled the tonnage of beef moving through American food stores and meat shops. And without such innovations, whether they come from product initiative products like the NCBA's or from Julia Child's French cookery books, there wouldn't be enough of a cattle industry in South Dakota to warrant holding the governor's conference. And you see, Will Rogers summed it up when he said, everybody's ignorant, they're just ignorant about different things. I mean, let me tell you, if you took me out to the corral and said, okay, Dave, brand that calf, we'd be pretty well on a road to defining ignorant right there. But and likewise, the 11th Commandment crowd. When a cattleman picks out a steer to feed his family and has it custom slaughtered and brings all the parts home, puts them in a freezer, and every time eats one of those meals and said, God, this is wonderful, what's everybody complaining about? I wonder what all the rest of his cattle looked like and where they went and how they were fed out. And I'm convinced that he doesn't know what he's talking about because he only knows what he is talking about. And that's what he's eating. But when it comes to recognizing and understanding what, and don't misunderstand me, I don't think you shouldn't be proud of what one is doing. I mean, why do it if you're not proud of it? But let's expand the horizons. Let's read those 5 meat magazines. When it comes to recognizing and understanding what happens when an industry has hesitated or failed to hold on to its crown, well, then I think I can feel pretty confident even if I can't brand a calf. But we didn't come here to talk about me, we came here to talk about you. And I think you are blessed that there has finally come a recognition in the leadership of this industry of the absolute need for reinventing beef production and merchandising. Looking at the future of the beef industry, the editor of another one of those magazines, Meat and Poultry, some 18 months ago said, the foods of the future, especially those produced by a perception-sensitive industry like the meat and poultry business, will be determined by 4 factors. 1, the availability of resources to create and process them. 2, the ability of consumers to buy them. 3, the regulatory structure allowing them. And 4, the emotions consumers attach to them. And that 4th, the emotions consumers attach to them, covers the whole consumer approach that Andy has already discussed, and I won't go further. He was, I think, crediting the beef sector with being equally perceptive sensitive as the poultry industry, and I think that's a bit of a stretch, up until now anyway. But it certainly is a growing truth, and I hope you're all able to recognize that it's a growing truth. Perception sensitive, that's a new phrase for me, by the way, means that the leadership of the beef industry has been engaged in the long ignored search for what has been tagged as value discovery, a research and development quest to find out what will tease the consumer appetite and convince them to buy and keep buying. Because they, the consumers, believe that it meets their standard for taste and price and quality. And I submit to you that too much of the fresh beef coming to market today does not meet that standard. It does not meet the chicken standard. And what the NCBA has on its docket is a plan to, and if it wasn't the NCBA, it should be somebody else, meet consumer demand, not to just meet consumer demand, but if possible, to exceed it. Working hard to create consumer desires, not simply to meet them, developing products that fit today's rapidly changing lifestyles. Consumers want good taste, they want convenience, they want healthful, and they want safe foods, and they want them priced right. And beef products can fit all of those criteria with endless variety, just as chicken and turkey do, but many of those products still have to be invented. By the way, the organization has, you've probably seen this. I told you to read these 5 meat processing magazines. I'm sure all of you read High Plains Journal or Livestock Weekly or Livestock Reporter or any of the feedstuffs, any of the fine other industry publications. And one of those, I'm sure, has reported NCBA's new $250,000 competition to develop one single new beef product. I think what's going to come out of that, and they haven't got all the plans done yet, is they're going to get 20,000 ideas coming in. They have to be marketable products now, not just another hamburger, a new beef product. They'll get 20,000 ideas out of that, of which 200 are going to be pretty good ones. They'll pay $250,000 to the winner, the one that's accepted, and then they'll have 199 more good ones to work on. You're fighting for a share of the stomach. And for the past 40 years, most particularly the past 25, that same stomach has neither shrunk nor gotten bigger. Andy's charts pointed out what was happening. Beef down, poultry up, pork up slightly on a per capita basis. But the gap has been filled with chicken and turkey, and to be sure, more consumers are eating more pasta. And some, though I think it's not a serious future inroad, as I said before, have stopped eating meat altogether. But I believe it's possible to recapture some, but not all, maybe a large part, but not all, of the lost market, and to hold it. You see, there's products around today that weren't there before. And the point is that here was beef sitting here, and none of this other stuff was out here, and all this other stuff moved in and took a share of beef's market because the industry, whoever the industry was at that point, wasn't scheming and sweating to create and hold those markets. I believe it's possible, as I said, to recapture some and hold it. I believe that the future for beef, that is the next 100 years, will be bright provided the quest in the next 4 years is fulfilled. Now, I'm a pretty serious guy, but I also read to my children. This is On Beyond Zebra. Dr. Seuss. Anybody here doesn't know who Dr. Seuss is? I've got some advice for you. I don't want you to fall into the trap that Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell fell into. Said Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell, my very young friend who's learning to spell, the A is for ape, the B is for bear, the C is for camel, the H is for hare, the M is for mouse, the R is for rat. I know all 26 letters like that. I know them all well, said Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell. On through to Z is for zebra. I know them all well. So now I know everything anyone knows, from beginning to end, from the start to the close, because Z is as far as the alphabet goes. Then he almost fell flat on his face on the floor when I picked up the chalk and I drew one letter more, and it was a letter he'd never dreamed of before. And I said, you can stop if you want with a Z, because most people stop with a Z, but not me. The places I go, there are things that I see that I never could spell if I stopped with a Z. Now, I'm telling you this because you're one of my friends. My alphabet starts where your alphabet ends. My alphabet starts with this letter called Yuz. It's the letter I use to spell Yuzzamatuz. Oh, you'd be surprised what there is to be found once you go beyond Z and start poking around. So on beyond zebra, explore like Columbus. Discover new letters like Wum is for Wumbus. This is a Wum. My high-spouting whale who lives high on a hill and who never comes down till it's time to refill. So on beyond Z, it's high time you were shown that you really don't know all there is to be known. We'll see you shortly.